you may not be able to reach me in the next hour. Okay, Erica's joining in a minute. All right. The good news is that we were on at 6:30 with cameras and volume working. And we have about 11 attendees now. Hello, hello, everyone. All right. We are here. It is a full party. So happy Tuesday, everyone. I don't know if this is just kicking off or it's just still giving some time for folks to join. I should mention we have about 11 attendees on the call now, and we have successfully confirmed 60 people to attend tonight's conversation. So we just got that update from Erica right before the call. So we may have some stragglers. Erica, how are you doing tech-wise? Can you hear us, see us? We see you, and I know you're on mute.
Okay. My tech savvy is just not there.
All good. That's why we're here as a team.
Very limited.
I almost wish you had some music playing as folks started trickling in.
Oh, I thought about that, and then I was like, that's like an added tech feature that I'm not sure about.
So we're 3 minutes in.
Ones.
I'll just keep a radio by my desk. I had to do that once for work, and thankfully it was there. Erica, for the sake of getting started, would you mind welcoming everyone and kind of giving them just a brief background on HPRA and our current board members for the New York City chapter?
I will get it going because I know we have a ton of questions. We have so much to cover, so I don't even want to take up too much time with the intros. But I would like to welcome everyone to our first panel discussion of the year. We're really excited about this because, I mean, after the year that we had in 2020, there's a lot to talk about. I feel like everyone is kind of getting their feet back on the ground. So we feel like this is the perfect time just to connect, get to know each other a little bit, discuss some of the things that we see that are definitely staying in the past, things that are going to be coming into the future, things that we should be looking at in terms of media relations and our relationships with each other in the PR and media side. And just to give a little background on myself, again, my name is Erica Sanchez, and I am the president of the New York chapter for the Hispanic PR Association. I have been with the New York chapter for about 8 years. I've been on the board of the chapter for about 5. It's something that I'm really passionate about. At a time in my career when I was looking for a community, HPRA came up and welcomed me with open arms and have been nothing but supportive of me, my career. Over the past 8 years, I've met numerous wonderful people that have helped me along in my career. And I can't even start to name names and go into it without taking up too much time. But a little bit of background on HPRA. We are a professional organization that was established way back around 1984. The organization started off in LA and slowly trickled out to a few of the major cities. So right now we have chapters in New York, in Miami, in the Carolinas, in Texas, and we have 2 chapters in California, and we're growing. So we're really excited about that. I'm gonna throw it over to Josephine so that we can get things started, because I know we have a lot to cover and I don't want to keep on rambling right now. So
you,
I'll let
Erica.
Josephine take it away.
Yes, thank you, Erica, and shout out to the members of our New York City board who have joined us today, including myself. I am the director of programming for this year's chapter, and I'm excited to have everyone join us in this very highly debated or interesting conversation that we're going to have. As Erica mentioned, we've called this first event for the year Back to Basics, Media Relations 2021, as opposed to one on, because we're going to start the year slow, but being mindful of what has happened and what we should predict will change in the coming months. A couple housekeeping rules I want to flag is that we are recording this session. I wanted everyone to be mindful of that as you decide to turn off your cameras later on if you have questions or while you're sending us chats. This will not be shared without anyone's permission in terms of the recording after, but flagging that so folks are aware. We encourage attendees to please share your questions in the chat. We have a list of questions today that we have put together to stimulate this conversation, but we will be taking one-offs. I'll be doing a good job of checking in to see some really topical questions come in as the conversations develop. But please don't be afraid to send us some or hold on to the end. We have saved some time for Q&A to ask questions later. We ask, and I mentioned this, understanding that our highly updated Zoom might be doing this automatically, but if for any reason anyone goes off mute, we ask you to please make sure you are on mute. Chantel, Erica, and myself might be muting folks that provide any noise feedback in case that does happen. What else? That is it. For the sake of conversation going on in the chat room, I love to see everyone respond, stating their name, where they work, or what borough or city they're in, just so that folks know who's here. And I'll get us kicked off with our first, I'll do an introduction of our panelists today. But I should mention, guys, if I don't do your background justice, please, after I share some information with everyone, feel free to chime in, or as my team says, popcorn in any additional details. To provide some background on myself, as I mentioned before, I'm the director of programming of this year's New York City chapter. I'm currently a coordinator at Amazon Corporate, based out in New York City. I've had some experience in lifestyle PR, entertainment PR, wine and spirits, music, topic for another day. But I share this to say that I've worked with media for quite some time now, for over eight years in different spaces. So I'm happy to have such a diverse group join us today. To kick things off, I'm going to introduce Jamison Bennett. Jamison Bennett is and I'll be reading off my teleprompter as I'm not a good actor. I got a 2-screen setup, so I'm not paying you guys attention. I'm multitasking just for you. Introducing Jamison Bennett. Jamison Bennett is a New York-based technologist, digital consultant, and radio producer, currently producing the Clay Kane Show on Sirius XM's Urban View channel 126. Check it out. He has produced over 40 specials at Sirius XM Radio. He's a serial entrepreneur who has led production, creative, and operational strategy for multiple startups, including Lena, and correct me on that one, Jamison, if you have.
You said it right.
Beautiful. Lena AI Health Solutions Incorporated, as well as Bennett AI Solutions Incorporated and Ideas Lab. He is a graduate of Louisville and also received his master's in mass communication at Morehead State in Kentucky. Social handles, and we'll be sure to plug this again later, is Jamestown, Jamestown 502. I don't know the area code, but I think that's what that is, on Instagram. Next is Marcus Haroon. Marcus Haroon is a news producer at MSNBC, a journalist with experience in over 10 newsrooms. At MSNBC, he has written breaking news scripts for nearly every anchor, including Brian Williams, Craig Melvin, and Andrea Mitchell, to name a few. Before moving to New York, he worked in local news for 5 years. He was an executive producer of Fox's Connecticut 7-hour morning show, where he led a team of 25 reporters, anchors, and producers, and grew ratings to over 200% just in 1 year. He earned his MBA and bachelor's in journalism from Quinnipiac University. Go Bobcats! Selfish plug. And one thing that I'm so excited to know, and the coincidence is just crazy, is that very recently Marcus produce an independent project called Essential Journalists. And we'll be sure to share the link of that for folks who want to dive into that and understand some of the conversation we'll talk about today as he references work with that project. For more info on Marcus and the work that he does, his website is marcusharoon.com, and Marcus can be found on Facebook and Instagram at Marcus Haroon. Last but not least, Alejandra Ramos, who is a Today Show contributor. Alejandra is a bilingual on-camera personality, television host, chef, and food writer who is passionate about sharing creative recipes and ideas that inspire readers to celebrate everyday moments and infuse a bit of indulgence into their daily lives. A co-host of Amazon's Today's Deal live show on Amazon.com, and has also appeared on Food, Fact, or Fiction, a show on the Cooking Channel. She is the creator of the award-winning lifestyle blog, alwaysorderdessert.com. Definitely check it out if you haven't. Alejandra is also a frequent contributor to Inside Edition, Dr. Oz, and the Telemundo New York entertainment show, Acceso Total. In addition to regularly contributing to several magazines and websites, the Oprah magazine, Real Simple, to name a few, because there are tons more. She has been named a Rising Latino Food Star by NBC News and on the One to Watch on the Latina magazine list. She is a graduate of the George Washington University and a culinary art school, which you will have to be specific because I don't know which one, so apologies on that. I actually attended ICE, the Institute of Culinary Education, so somewhat familiar due to my experience in wine and spirits. You can find Alejandra on Instagram at alwaysalejandra, and on Twitter at alwaysalejandra, and at Always Order Dessert on Facebook. So if I didn't do your intros enough justice, please feel free to take this time to add any other background on you guys. Obviously, it's a mouthful. We have some very experienced panelists with us today, to say the least. How are we feeling, guys?
Very excited.
That sounded great.
That was excellent. That was perfect.
Beautiful.
A+.
So, yes. I have my water here and I'm so excited. And then shout out again to our attendees. We have 15 folks with us now, more folks trickling in. We know it's been, crazy work week, crazy days. So we appreciate you guys joining us and kicking this event off with us today. So I'm going to go straight to the questions. If anyone has any concerns, please feel free to share them in the chat or questions as they come in. Beautiful. I'm seeing conversation already happening. Let me just go to all panelists and attendees. All right, here we go. First question, and let me know if we want to go in order of introductions or if you guys want to take turns as answers come to mind, maybe raise your hand and we can make sure we keep this as civil as possible. First question, how has your business changed since March 2020? And this is an important question for all of you, understanding and respecting that you guys are all respected media professionals in different industries, whether it's radio, TV, influencer work. I know that some of us have been doing, or online in terms of print versions and stuff like that. Who would love to take this one on first? Ooh.
You can go ahead, Marcus.
All right, cool.
All right, so thanks again for having us today. I think this is a really exciting topic and it's so changing so often that I think that I'm fascinated to see what the other panelists have to share today too. So to start us off on this question, I think that one thing about TV is you do get to see some of the changes and what happened as you watch TV. So you've probably seen so many people's bookshelves, their kitchens, and their living rooms, like you do with your coworkers, but now you've seen a ton of media personalities, news anchors, and others being broadcast on TV from their homes. So as it was mentioned, Essential Journalists is a documentary that I made kind of about the changes that happened in the media industry over the last year. It's a project that is continuing to develop, but some of the changes that I'll point out are you're able to see those people that are working from home based on seeing their background, but a lot is happening in the newsroom as well, and that has changed, where still now at MSNBC and many news organizations around the country, we're still working from home. I know that you guys probably are too, but having an empty newsroom is something that's crazy and not something that you see ever. News is 24/7, so usually it's hustling, bustling, it's 3 a.m., there's teams there. It's midnight, there's teams there. There's people in the newsroom all the time. But at this point, we've seen a lot of empty newsrooms, which is crazy. All the MSNBC is very panel driven. So you see a lot of guests on the air, you see a lot of interviews that happen, and all of those are happening remotely right now. You see occasionally we interview people in person, but at least 6 feet away or with equipment that allows us to stay a certain distance. But mostly all of our interviews, like a lot of TV news interviews, are happening remotely. We have huge multi-million-dollar studios at Rockefeller Center that have mostly been empty for a year, which is absolutely crazy. All of our panelists and everyone that joins our shows, show like Deadline White House, you know that we always have a ton of guests on that show. All of them are still joining remotely. If the employees of MSNBC and news organizations aren't allowed into the building to keep safe, then we're not having contributors or guests or people that you might be pitching to come onto the news. They're also not coming into the building either, because we're continuing social distance. But and we have questions about how that's going to change, and I'd love to hear the other panelists too on what changed in your industries.
Yeah, well, I'll go next. So like Marcus said, it's 100% remote job now. I am, for the first 6 months, a lot of the shoots and everything that I was done shut down, and a lot of the studios that I was working in shut down, so I wasn't working. And then it finally started picking up as people started to realize how to be able to do remote shoots. So I've done, like I did a TV commercial where half of the producers and stuff were all via Zoom. And it was all shot in my own home and in my like garden and stuff. All my Today Show segments are done from here, from my little kitchen studio, through FaceTime. All my Amazon shows are all done again from remotely broadcast through here, and every single show that I work on has different programs that we use. In terms of how, you know, the specifics of how it's affected me, like it's way more work, especially as someone who was a contributor, who I was able to do multiple shows in a day. I could go from Food Network to Amazon, do an Inside Edition segment all in one day. Now that's impossible just because of the workload. I used to work with food stylists, with producers, with hair, makeup, wardrobe, with prop stylists, everybody who would be involved in what I would do, that would, you know, it's all that support work that allows you to focus on what your strength is. Yes, the village. It's very much a collaborative process. And now it's pretty much 100% me. I have, you know, 1 or 2 producers in the ear. I'm connected to the control room, but everything is me. So I'm doing all the cooking, I'm doing all the grocery shopping, I'm doing the cleaning, I'm doing the setup, I'm doing lights and cameras and everything. So it's way more expense too, because there's a lot of things that I've had to invest in. This is actually a studio that I built for myself. I started working my home and it just wasn't something that was tenable for a long time. So I actually ended up renting a small studio apartment down the street from where I live, and turning it into a shooting space where I can do my work, which has been the most amazing thing that I was able to do. And I was able to do because of the drop in rents in New York due to COVID. But it was, you know, it's also there are a lot of people that I work with that lost their jobs, right? Like a lot of the prop stylists, the food stylists, like Marcus said, no one's at 30 Rock. So they let all these teams go. And so that's a lot of people who are now out of work or, you know, working in different places because of, again, this remote work environment where people just aren't in the studio. So you don't have the wardrobe teams, you don't have the full makeup teams, you don't have the props and all these people there anymore.
It's just crazy how things have changed from a physical standpoint, but also from a responsibility standpoint. Jameson, thank you for hopping back on. I know we lost you for a second. I just wanted to highlight these are important points to consider as PR professional, as we sometimes can think about everything that's happening on our side, and can, you know, I always say one of my greatest strengths is empathy, and I've learned how important that is when communicating with other people, including journalists. So it's just fascinating to hear that side, because, you know, we think about the physical, but I think we forget about responsibility in a business that's already stretching some staffs just based on changes that have been made before March. Jameson, please feel free to chime in. We're still on question 1.
Absolutely. So, SiriusXM, as you know, you've previously been there at 1221 Avenues of America. It's a zoo there. We've had countless town halls, countless musical performances. It's every day there's a new album release or film release there. But since the pandemic happened, it's been all remote. We've upgraded our remote to where we have remote boards that we're working with, which is new. Zoom everything, and it's been a cost-cutting measure that I think will stay post the pandemic. As far as Zoom has gave us accessibility to celebrities and newsmakers and change agents that usually sometimes with locations and traveling that we haven't had access to. So it's had a beneficial effect as far as access that we've gotten with radio. Radio as a whole, terrestrial radio, AM/FM has flourished during COVID because of the local news updates. So listenership is actually up for radio, and people always wonder about how the industry will survive with all this new media and podcasting. COVID has actually been a shot and for radio to give real-time updates as far as phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, vaccinations, and also the protest movement. So 60% of adults have trusted radio as their go-to during the pandemic. There's been studies on that. So all remote has been the change, and it's going to be like that for a while. We don't own the buildings. SiriusXM is located in Texas. We're located in DC, New York, LA. We don't own all of the buildings, so we don't call the shots as far as production. So it will be remote for a while. And that affects our relationships with PR as far as what we used to be able to do as far as the performances, the releases, and it's our new normal based off our infrastructure.
Yeah, I would like to add one tidbit, and then Jameson, I might want have you explain, kind of just do a brief summary of the show that you're producing, just to give panelists, attendees some insight. But I will share this. Very early on last year, I attended a PR session with entertainment publicists. And I will say that I can quote Beyonce's publicist on the fact that they too are experiencing the same issues that, some of the issues that you're mentioning and some of the issues that we've experienced from a production standpoint. Like, do you think a Beyonce can put together something really quick without the village? And it seems like a very fancy term or a dropping of the beehive, but it's more about like understanding that this has been challenging for everyone. And I think the biggest takeaway that she shared was that you have to understand that quality might change. Maybe, the amount of stuff we can do will increase as we get back to normal, but understand that the quality of work has been changed and it's our only option. And like, I hate to use the word Beyonce, but we'll sit and name some other person, like, the live, I think, the Versus battle is such a great example of like hiccups that everyone is experiencing, whether it's starting a Zoom call or setting up a meeting or a virtual concert or press center. Just keeping that all in mind as we were all working together. And Jameson, please briefly, can you describe or just inform our guests today of the show that you work on and the subject matter?
Absolutely. Clay Kane show on Urban View. We cover politics mostly. He's also known for Black Trivia Quiz on Thursdays, and also the Exonerated series where we highlight wrongfully convicted people who've been incarcerated for years and who tell their stories about how they ever overcome the criminal justice system. And we're Monday through Friday, 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern. And we're all about highlighting Black and brown change agents and how actionable insights. We're not a show that you call in to complain about what's going on wrong in the world. It's about what can you. These are the tools, resources available to you. Give us a progress report on that. And that's really our approach as a channel, top to bottom, from Karen Hunter Show on. That is our mission statement, and we do a good job living up to that, I think.
Thank you, Jameson. I wanted to make sure that everyone knew the wealth of knowledge that you bring to this conversation and the background, and where some of the updates you're sharing with us come from. Thank you. I'm going to move on to the next question. So the next question is, how would you describe the state of the PR media business today? And what that question is essentially asking is, how do you guys see the PR journalist relationship today? Are we good? Can we do better? Be transparent. Don't be shy. Alejandra.
Yeah, so I'll start. I think that it's one of those things that really depends on the person, right? Like on the PR person or agency or whoever it is that you're working with, because I've had some people that I work with that have been incredible and that I've made amazing connections with, and that especially during this time have understood the challenges that I'm working with and that I'm dealing with, and that I'm like, hey, like you're saying, the quality isn't the same. There's technical hiccups. I'm doing everything myself, so it's just trying to get it done. And there are people who have understood that and have been flexible and have sort of, like work with you to get me the props that I need, the products that I need, to get me the information, who understand that, UPS had a delivery exception, and so they put some products in an Uber and get it to me. So like there's people who understand that. And then I think that there's some others that perhaps really would, haven't really realized that there is a big, huge shift. So it may still be the Today Show, or it may still be, a major something like the established media, but we're all working basically the exact same tools that everybody has in their homes. So yeah, but I do feel like I've built some better relationships with people just because there's so much more. Yeah. And I think, we're talking before about how the business has changed, and we brought up some of the hardships and some of the things that are tricky and harder now. But I also think working from home, working remotely has had a lot of benefits in that we have a lot more control in what we're able to do, right? There's a lot more direct contact. So I'm working much more directly with PR people and with brands and brand representatives than I perhaps would have in the past, when they were maybe just in touch with my producers or with PAs and just kind of sending stuff along. Now it's really much more one-on-one, and we have much more of a connection, which I think is great. I think that that's something that maybe we wouldn't have had that opportunity to do beforehand.
Right. If you haven't gone through the fire with a media contact yet, last year has been the fire. I think that's one way to put it.
Yeah,
and thank you.
Bonding.
We have all it's not about I can't even imagine. No, we all imagined last year. We were all in it. And thank you for answering that question twofold, because that was actually the next question, in terms of how do you see it now in comparison to how you saw it before? So Jameson or Marcus, I don't know if you want to answer that question in that twofold perspective.
I can touch on it in twofold. I think Poynter has they have an active tracker of newsroom layoffs, furloughs, and closures. It's been hard for media because media relies on a lot of business models that are archaic, or subscription is absolutely not enough, or paywalls not going to get it done. And it's all about providing value. Relationships with PR have gotten, I agree. They've gotten stronger because, yes, we have been in that fire, and we're all on the same page about the world is messed up right now. We are living through the Great Depression with smartphones. Everybody's struggling in some shape or form, whether mental health or financially. And it's not really time for fluff pieces. And this is in that social impact lane, what on your clientele list, or what clients do you have that are doing something in the community? Or what campaigns or initiatives are helping people? Are you helping people? Yes, we can get that on the airways, because there's no time for no frivolous conversations. We don't care if you have a high follower count on social media if you're not doing the work in some capacity. And that, it's almost unspoken now. So we get on the phone more with PR people. They talk about they give multiple pitches at a time, and they give it from many different angles, and they get rid of the redundancy. We're doing this for women's rights over here. We're doing this for voter suppression over here. It's though the pitches are way more focused now, and even the celebrities, they're leading with what their social impact is, opposed to just some random pitch.
isn't it crazy how, I mean, when I started, people were still picking up the phone. And as my experience in the PR media industry unraveled, less of that happened. And I'm finding that people are picking up the phone again. But
Yeah.
if you have that number, right, like there is an incision, you're not just calling random news desks. You either have that relationship with that reporter to have those conversations. And I think that's important. Marcus, I'd love to let you take the stage on this question.
Yeah,
Andy.
I want to bring up some more stats on kind of what's going on. Jameson started getting to it, that of like what's happening, and then as a result, how PR is reacting or not reacting. With more than 3,000 journalists in the US laid off or losing their job in this last year alone, that impacts the people who lost their job, but also the people who are left. If there are people who are laid off in your newsroom, and just about every newsroom in New York has been affected. I think it's definitely a nationwide issue, but right here in New York, even at the highest paid newsrooms, they're suffering just as much. And then the people who are left are doing more work. They're working harder, and they still have to be there and still have to fill the page of a newspaper, to fill the show on TV, to fill a radio show, whatever the case is. And the other thing is, and some other things are, the mental health impact on the journalists and the people who are specifically more in news, my area. People, when you're dealing with a lot and you kind of feel all the news and all the craziness that's going on, people say, oh, turn off the news and unplug for a few days. The people who work in news can't unplug because that's literally their job. That's what you're doing every day. So saying like, oh, I'll avoid the death count today because that's affecting me, doesn't work if you're writing that story or you're the anchor reporting that story. So there's this there's a heaviness within everyone, and I don't think anyone has had any break in the last year. It was an election year, so it would have been crazy anyways. And then with the insurrection and the impeachment trial, it kind of got even bigger in terms of how long the election went. We had the pandemic, we had the social justice uprisings. Each of those in an individual year would be an exhausting process, but they all came at the same time for journalists. And just to add on top of that, I know this is all sad stuff, but just to add on top of that, to give you like what actually is going on, more than 900 journalists across the world ended up passing away due to COVID. We know that the death count is crazy within every area, every country. The US numbers are bad, New York numbers are bad. But if you're losing people due to layoffs and you're losing coworkers due to passing away from COVID, and then you have to mental health issues dealing with what's going on, it's not just an everyday normal day when you go to work. So if you get an everyday normal pitch that we have been getting for years, there is no reason for us to act on that. There's no like, oh, there's a little bit room in the show today, I guess, for any random thing you happen to bring us. It needs to be very targeted, and the ones that are working are the ones that are very targeted, as you brought up. We don't have time for fluff pieces. That's exactly right. It needs to be on one of the main topics of the day, or we're not even reading it. If you think as a journalist, you dealing with those various factors that I just mentioned, you're really only going to speak to the people that are going to bring you something that takes your show into one of the main areas of the news. And we're having more people watch the news than ever. We had like ridiculous ratings in radio, in local news, in TV news, in digital, breaking records all around, because we need to give people what they need to know. And if you can provide value in PR with a guest in a conversation, that would be the area to take it, but not just promoting random things that like there's no way you could fit it into what's going on. So I'd actually say this is a problem that PR has had forever, but it's really been exacerbated by the pandemic, where you need to realize your audience, you need to realize who's going to read it, you need to realize what you're putting in the email and what you're pitching to make sure it's targeted for the person who's getting it. Very much a side note, but I'm not someone that takes pitches. My role isn't one that is affected by that. So anyone just watching, I'm not the person. But either way, I still get pitches, and I know the ones that we're not even opening.
Alejandra,
I
I think
can
you might
build
want to
up,
add.
yeah.
Okay, go.
Yeah, so I am in the fun part of stuff, right? I do food, content, cooking, lifestyle, entertaining. I do hacks, all that kind of stuff. And even within my space, I'm still looking for the things that have value. So it's not to say, if it's not specifically about COVID or news or anything like that, it can still have value. So it can, for example, if I'm doing a segment where I'm talking about products, I'm looking for the BIPOC owners. I'm looking for the small businesses. I'm looking for the ones with an interesting story or an interesting angle, rather than just like, something that a big corporation has put out. Like, I'm prioritizing these kinds of things. So I want like Latina owned things. I want Black owned companies, Asian. So like, I want to be able to highlight them and to highlight these businesses. And it's still within the same context of like my segments, which are fun and I'm laughing and there's food and it's cookies and whatever, but it's still a way to kind of put these people on that great platform. And that's how I bring that out into the world. So when I am getting stuff, yeah, I am still looking for those angles. I'm looking to see who's doing this stuff. I want to see, if you're going to pitch me like an Asian food product, I want that owner or creator or chef or whatever to be an Asian chef. I don't want a white person doing that. So these are things that I'm looking for, because I want to make sure that you're paying attention to the conversations that we're having in the world, that you're paying attention to what it is that we're trying to do, that the diversity that we want, the representation that we want. And that is something that it can happen in, your heavy news. It can happen in the medical part. It can happen again in the food, party, lifestyle, entertaining part.
Thank you, Alejandra, for adding on to that. In the midst of, at the early stages of the pandemic, I was in the wine and spirits industry, and we took a pause as publicists in that space. But slowly, as we had deeper conversation with our clients, I worked with different brands, and understanding where they are in the pandemic and how that relates to current trends or topics that journalists cared about, showed us the opportunity to continue working in a pitching space in a very respectful way. So thank you for adding that. I do want to flag to the attendees that we see your questions. They're not forgotten. We will get to them. Jameson, I think you wanted to add something, but I also wanted to mention, thank you, Marcus, for sharing the stats. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of that information that Marcus shared are some of the highlights of his documentary, which I watched, and it was pretty scary to see those numbers, or to look at journalists like people and understanding that, they're going through stuff, and sometimes even harder. There is no turn off button. And I think that was an important takeaway for me when I watched your documentary. Jameson, love to.
Mine was real brief. He literally touched on the mental health aspect. Like, I'm 33. I've never had I never went to a therapist before until after the Capitol riots.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah, but they literally had signed, because we get trolls on our channel and who call in, who threaten death threats and all type of stuff, and they had murder the media. They wrote that onto the wall as they exited the Capitol building. So it was like, when you're bombarded with that, it's on your mental. Even though you stop work, my show ends at 3, it's still on my mind. Like, so I totally, excellent points from both of you. It's all about being purposeful in whatever lane that you're in. I'm in agreement with that, and that just hit home for me. So that was great feedback.
So I think it's safe to say that for the last 12 months, media bureaus, editorial calendars out the window, right? But would you guys feel comfortable sharing the best PR pitch that you guys received in the last year? If you're comfortable, whatever is most appropriate. We like to focus on the good, especially at the end of the day. So I'd hate to ask what the worst one was. We don't want to put anyone out on Call Street. But if you guys can share the best, and if you feel comfortable sharing a WTF one, we'll take that too.
Well, in terms of, it's not like a specific pitch, but I think that what's been most effective for me has been the PR people that I've built relationships with that have been like, I can, they realize that I'm doing everything here, right? So like everything that you see, I do. And so not only do I need products and do I need ideas, but I need other things. So I need flowers, I need food, I need ingredients, I need clothing. There's all these things that I no longer have a budget for that I'm doing myself, which is an opportunity, I think, for publicists and for people who are working with brands, because my producers now are letting me talk about stuff, right? They're letting me say, I got these flowers from 1-800-Flowers, or I got these, this ingredient came from Whole Foods. I can say this kind of stuff that I wasn't previously able to say because they realized that they can't give me the money to do it. I have to do the work myself. So they're allowing the brands to kind of come in and help. So it's an opportunity for brands. It's an opportunity for companies. But the ones that have sort of recognized that and who've been like, what do you need? What can I do? How can I work with you on this? And have just shown that initiative where they've just been like, hey, I can dress you. I can give you clothing. And I'm like, yes, please give me clothing. I'm running out of clothing.
The
So
logistics.
things like that were, yes, exactly. So seeing those opportunities, like when you're recognizing that these journalists, everybody's working from home now, and we need so much more that we used to get from our teams at work that we're now just doing on our own. So there's these opportunities. So yeah, I think that's probably what's been the most effective, the best, that I'm like, yes, great, I can work with you. And it's brought, it's created some great segments, and it's created, and it's let me put these people on my platform because of these sort of backdoor ways that they've found to work with me on. In terms of like the WTF ones, I think it's just the people that like have no concept of what's going on. And it's just, they're just kind of like pushing the stuff. They're not really paying attention. They don't really know who I am, what I'm doing. They're sending stuff that doesn't really make any sense. Also, the one thing that drives me insane always is if I do a segment about a specific thing, like don't come at me with that specific, I did it. It's done. That story's done. I'm not doing that story.
It's past, friends. It's past.
Yes, I did like
maybe next year.
Companies.
Yeah, what are the odds that our
calendars
this year will be the same? Yeah, exactly. I've seen some very interesting rants on those on that subject on like PR Caesars on Facebook before. Very unfortunate to witness it. Yeah, it's very unfortunate to witness a PR professional get flagged on that on public forums, but it happens often. So if you're thinking about it, don't. Or maybe ask a friend, a colleague for counsel on outreach like that before reaching out to a reporter. Jamison or Marcus, any examples you'd like to share, positive or bad?
I'll go. We didn't have an exonerated series until we had our first exoneree that we helped as a show. Duke University Innocence Project shared a story with us about Ronnie Long, trying to get him out of jail. DNA evidence showed that he did not rape this woman. He's been in jail for 44 years in North Carolina, and a Democratic governor didn't pardon him. And we helped over the course. So we interviewed a Duke professor who was working on the case, and we made it a campaign with the show. And after the course of, I believe, 6 or 7 weeks, he was released. September of 2020. And then he came on the show, and then we launched our series based off the impact that we got. That the Duke University they pitched us. It was a clear cut. Let's get this on. Let's explore this case. If he didn't do this rape, he should be out of jail immediately. And Ronnie Long is a success story of the power of radio and the power of PR, and informing people about taking action and calling the governor to put pressure on him. And eventually it turned out in our favor. So that was a feel-good story of last year, and which sparked a segment that we've now taken in 2021. We get crazy stories all the time now from a lot of Black conservatives are trying to rebrand under Biden, or they're trying to switch it up. So those are the pitches we ignore.
I think we might have lost Jamison, but let me know, folks.
We remember the damage that he was in office. So those are the weird pitches.
Jamison, you scratched up for a bit, but we got you again. So apologies. I don't think our attendees heard the last part on the work that you're doing now.
Did you hear all of the Ronnie Long part?
We did.
Okay, so after that, I was saying that we have a lot of conservatives who are trying to rebrand under Trump, who pitched to come on radio, but likely didn't forget what they did for 4 years, harming people and saying bad things that were not helpful to Black and brown community. So we ignore those.
Wow, that's all I have to say to that. But I think it's safe to say that inboxes work both ways in terms of archives. And whatever you write out there can be referenced at a later date in terms of switching stories or teams. Marcus, I think you wanted to add something to this one question.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add here is
Thank
that
you, Jameson.
working on, as things started to transition, it was kind of like 100 to 0 in terms of guests and people that we're bringing on the show. And because when everything locked down, we kind of locked down. But then when they realized how much we'd be relying on FaceTime, how much we'd be relying on Zoom to put people on TV, the people who were pitching guests, but then with the guests provided all of their information about how to connect to them virtually. That's exactly what we needed. So people realizing that, okay, they're not going to be coming into the studio. It doesn't matter exactly their physical address or if they're available to fly into LA or DC or New York. But those who were saying, well, he has FaceTime, he has Zoom, he has this and that, and he can be ready to be on any show. That was like, well, that's precisely what we needed right now, and that was most helpful.
We wearing our logistics and tech hats strongly, I think, in this last year as PR professionals who have many hats. It's a closet full of them. I think has proven to be helpful to our media counterparts, and I want to make sure that we all take that as a takeaway. I've been in situations where I'm like, am I even a publicist anymore? But it's all in the game. It all comes back, and you know, whether it's growing relationships with members of the media like yourself, or ensuring your clients and brands that the coverage or the opportunity was a good fit, I think is the reward from all the hats that we wear all the time. My next question was going to be about what to expect this spring, what to expect this summer, but I understand that might be a bit tough. So I don't know if there's anything we're flagging on your end in terms of, like, you know, back in the day, what was it? In June, we're talking about back to school. In May, we're talking about summer. And then there's usually that usual dead month of August. Will August be dead? Any feedback that you guys can share?
I will say in my standpoint, in terms of food lifestyle content, I think we're pretty much sticking to what we previously always did, right? It was very sort of seasonal, very holiday focused. So those things are all definitely still kind of going. I haven't seen any kind of changes in terms of that. Of course, you're switching things up, right? So it's a lot of like work from home, like what are we eating when we're working from home? Like there's those sort of things, like what are you making for your kids? How to prep food for your kids who are at school, at home, or spending more time with you. So there's that sort of the angle now of the things that we are all kind of dealing with. But I think the overall themes, at least within my space, have been pretty consistent to what they've been in the past. And I think definitely much more so this year than last year, because I think last year people were still sort of navigating and figuring things out and a little bit more hesitant about things. Whereas this year, it seems like we're almost kind of getting back to normal. And I can even say that with conversations that I've had with the different shows that I work on, you know, I'm starting to hear again when we're back in the studio. So like for a while, we were not saying that for a while. And I think we are hearing that. So I feel like maybe we'll be back in the studio by the end of the year. But I am seeing that sort of hopefulness coming back.
Thank you. It sounds like it's messaging from your side is in tandem to what officials are telling us about being out in the streets. Marcus, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, two things in the news area that I'll mention. One of them that I think it's going to be at least through Labor Day, you see in terms of newsrooms kind of getting back to what they used to be, at least through Labor Day. So I think it is hopeful with a lot of people getting vaccines and everything, but everyone's going to take it very seriously, I'm sure. Just like they did when we did with shutting down, I think we're going to be coming back kind of slowly. And then in terms of content, the other thing is you see in the news industry, a lot of changes happen when a presidential, when the president changes. So with a transition like we had from November to January, a lot changes in newsrooms as well. Who the White House correspondents for news networks are changes, who some of the anchors of some of the shows are. Just an example, Fox News changed like half of their lineup. So there's like all different hosts on now. So with those changes, we've been in severe breaking news mode for more than a year, where it's at least for us, where it just kind of wall to wall, just whatever the latest thing is, we're on top of it. It's kind of been that way for the last 5 years, but I'd say specifically the last year has been the craziest. And once once the pandemic starts to wean down a little bit, and we have a different president, and just the speed of the news is a little bit different, I think you'll see some new segments start up at different places. I think you'll see shows trying to reinvent the angle that they're going in. When we've had such high ratings for so long, prolonged every single day, and then if you look at basically every news channel the last 2 weeks, it has gone down a little bit. The insurrection ended, the inauguration happened, impeachment finished, there's a lot more kids going back to school. With some of these changes happening, people will end up turning away from news because they're not locked in their house. So then the news and a lot of media are going to do something a little bit different to draw people back if they do start to leave. So I would say, just broadly, watch out for any new shows that start, watch out for any new brands or content or new segments within shows that start, because that would be an area for you to pitch to. Especially if someone's making something new, they always want to get on top of whatever that niche is, and that might be an opportunity for you.
Thank you, Marcus. It sounds like on the similar to the PR side, production companies and stations might be getting their marketing budgets back too, with new projects coming up, to say the least. Jameson, is there? Would you like to add to this OneNote question? I'm gonna skimmy on to some of the panelist questions right after, just so folks
No,
don't.
I'll keep going. Just for radio, Zoom production is here to stay, because it solves a lot of different problems from a logistical standpoint, and it's cheaper. And we were trying to stay away from layoffs, but we are talking about bringing people back into SiriusXM facilities that we can in around June. But we've kind of taken an approach like Twitter and Google, where some people, you don't have to come back to the office. There are some people who do absolutely need to run a board, but if you're doing accounting or something for the company, then no. So they're trying to keep it under control in that capacity. And that will affect pitches as well, because we used to have the FaceTime with a lot of people coming into the studio during regular operations. Now, like I said, they're picking up the phone and they're building relationships and pitching in that manner.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think one thing to consider during this event, when we talk about back to basics or back to normal, whatever normal is that I don't think there will be a normal anymore. I think, us as professionals, whether it's on the media side or the PR side or on the brand side, we've learned some new tricks, sadly, in the last year. And to Jameson's point, Zoom meetings over in person, or a trip across country just to meet, that might not go back to normal. And I'm curious, and I look forward to seeing what are some of the habits that we picked up in the last year that will be here to stay on a long-term level, depending on technology and how it continues to improve. Because I don't think Zoom and the rest of the gang is over in terms of the updates that they're bringing us. I want to move over to some of the questions in the chat. We're at 7:23, so almost time, and I want to make sure that I give these live action questions some light. So the first one, I believe, was from Cami Crawford, and I'll read this verbatim. So Cami, please let us know if you intended it to be read differently. But more and more journalists are stretched thin, and this has been exacerbated by the pandemic. We've heard some feedback that this has affected reporters' feelings about receiving news under embargo. Many contacts have said they prefer not to receive news unless it is within 24 hours of the embargo lift. Do you think this is an industry trend? What are your feelings about receiving information about new products under embargo? Does anyone feel very passionate about answering that first?
I can say from my end, it's not as necessary or as important to me. It's more, like I need it now. Basically, like we said, we're stretched thin. I'm doing what I need to do. If my segment is on Thursday, then I just need something for Thursday. And hearing about something is great, but I may forget about it. I'm not going to prep that far in advance for it. Things change constantly. The segments get booked, it gets moved a few weeks, so things like that. So I think for me, now, and I mean less so, and it was never really a huge deal for me for something, hearing about something under embargo, and even less so now, and especially in my space where I think it's just not that important. Like the exclusivity isn't really that important for me. I work much more immediately, so it's never been something that would be like, oh, okay, it's good to know about this now. I'd rather just know when I'm working, and that's when it's going to be most valuable to me, because I'll probably just forget.
Thank you. That's very helpful to keep in mind. Jameson and Marcus, any adds to that specific question?
You're in the business of breaking news. Embargo is an afterthought.
Ooh, I can imagine that word becoming agent at some point, but we will see when that happens. Next question here from Jean Bryan. When PR people are not prepared or understand the journalists or media need, or understand their needs, your needs, and don't have a relationship with you, it shows. If you bring value, whether it's a call or an email, does it break away from the pack? And I think what he's trying to say, and apologies, Jean, if you are a she, apologies for the pronoun confusion. Regardless of how busy you are, do some things make it through the crack from a cold pitch standpoint? Jean, I don't know if you're here with us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I'll say for me, things that break it through are people who are aware of what I'm doing, people who reach out and make those conversations. Even if you see something that isn't necessarily related to what you're doing, but you like my work, or you congratulate my work, or you reach out and say, hey, I read this thing you wrote, I saw the segment that you did, and you reach out and build that relationship. Me having that relationship with you is going to help you break through when the time comes. So I think that's probably what comes through, and knowing that you have the value, knowing that there's a genuine, honest relationship, feeling like you're an authentic person rather than someone's just trying to sell me something.
If they done their research, they tie it to a branded segment. A cold email works just fine. See who they previously had on and add value to the conversation. I see that you covered X, Y, and Z, but would you cover da 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 da? If it's a code email, that works wonders, and it tells me that okay, they're paying attention to our channel, our shows, and we'll take that.
Adding value is, I think, what we've covered in just about every section of this, that you need to be adding value, especially now. So those who are paying attention to what we are doing, paying attention to who they're pitching and what they're pitching, that you could ever imagine actually seeing it come to fruition on the platform that you're pitching to is all very important, and it will help you get your products where you want them to be.
I'm going to try to sneak in a question or two from our set list that we were going through earlier. In that I think I've read through all the questions in the chat. Curious, and again, I'll be reading this verbatim. We're moving into multi-hyphenates, various mediums and platforms. Do you believe this is a trend or here to stay? Example, Clubhouse. What are your thoughts on the craziness that's happening out here on these iOS-only device-operated platforms? Jameson, I see you. Yeah, what's up?
I think that Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces could really be helpful to PR professionals. I think that they could be leveraged in a way where specific chats, the specific chats that create a conversation where you balance that, okay, we have some big name people over here, we're talking about a particular issue and it's brought to you by this PR institution or tied to a specific pitch. I think that I think it's not going away anytime soon. And the beauty of Twitter Spaces is that you can archive these chats and it can be repurposed content. The people who win in the future with free apps, these free, like Clubhouse was free, unless you paid for it for somebody to give it to you early. But like, however you repurpose this content to, and also these online events as we open up, how you can really make an impact and be the topic of the day in a productive way. I think that if you have vision with curating the right rooms and presented by and leading off with something that's branded or a particular pitch and make sure it helps your brand.
We're losing you, Jameson, just FYI.
of that, but also curate a great room. If you have a vision for that, you could. Can you hear me?
We can now.
Okay, I apologize. I'm sorry. Real quick, if you curate the right rooms and you promote the right way, and you brand it correctly, Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces will be very beneficial. And you can repurpose that content, and you can keep it going in print and otherwise, and video as well.
So consider it for your programming.
Absolutely.
Alejandra and Marcus, what are your thoughts on these new mediums? Is it competing? Is it interesting? Are you not for it?
I'm overwhelmed. No,
Same.
I'm not.
Who has all the
yet,
time?
I know. I had someone ask me the other, or invite me, and they're like, "Come do it," and I was like, "I honestly, I don't have the bandwidth for it right now. I'm just getting through my day and all the work that I'm doing." I will say that in terms of from the work that I do, producers, that's where producers are getting a lot of their ideas, right? Like I'm getting producers who are calling me and asking me to do segments about TikTok trends and about Instagram trends and you know, the feta pasta that was going through every internet thing recently or things like that. So they're using that for to create segments and to create segment ideas. So while I may not have the bandwidth to be on every single one of those, you guys should be, because you, speaking to the PR professionals, should be and see what is hot and what are people talking about, because those are ideas that producers that I work with, specifically on the shows that I work with, that's what they want. They want to do segments about TikTok hacks and about TikTok recipes and Instagram recipes and what people are talking about out there. So yeah, know what's going on, know what's hot, talk to your kids if you're not really on it. Like I recently got asked to do a TikTok segment and I wasn't on TikTok yet. And I asked my really good friend to ask her daughter to tell me some ideas. And that's where I got my ideas. And we made it happen with
Gen Z.
Like 12, 13-year-old daughter. So yeah, get that information however you can, but that is a source of inspiration for the people behind the scenes.
Marcus, any ads on this topic or in general? Anything anyone wanted to get off their chest before we signed off this evening?
To add on to that, I think it's just like every other social media platform. If you are on it and if you end up trending or if you end up catching people's eye, it doesn't matter what social media platform it is, it will make it into the mainstream media or into articles, into TV segments. Just how we just heard, that is the kind of flow that you see with this went viral on Facebook, this went viral on YouTube. It could be any platform, the next one. So being on them, just know everyone's watching them, and that is whenever you can make an impact there, you'll see that impact take charge all over, I think.
Yeah, I think an important takeaway for me as a PR professional is learn how to use it. If you're going to pitch it, serve that pitch in a silver platter. DUMIY proof. Less work on the media professional you're pitching. And Lord knows, I think if we can all get ahead of it and share these type of opportunities with producers and such, if the pitch is right and it's broken down, it might be considered, I think, safe to say. This just reminds me of how I research every video platforming software. I think it was in April, to see what worked best. And that was a fun project, but I was prepared to pitch either if the opportunity arrives.
If needed.
Jameson, I think you had one last tidbit you wanted to share.
Yeah, Substack is a threat to traditional media. And I think that a lot of pitchers will a lot of journalists are creating their own Substack, where the subscription, where you can only get, I'm writing this story or I'm writing this article or I'm carrying this campaign only on Substack, and use that subscription to follow me there. And I think that will grow, and it's actually making a lot of money for journalists who are struggling or who have been laid off. They still have an audience. I still have people who know me who write about this particular issue, whether climate or anything. Substack is something that's here to stay outside of Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces, which is upcoming next month, which I'm really high about because you can save those chats. So that's it.
Jameson, thank you. I would love to spend an additional hour just to learn about that specifically, but I'll end it with this note. Thank you to all of you, Alejandra, Marcus, and Jameson, for joining us today. Shout out to you and your entrepreneurial efforts as well. It does not go unnoticed. The struggle is real, and the media industry, PR industry is changing, and I think we're all doing the best that we can to adapt. and stay relevant and stay on top of our game. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. As we mentioned, we will highlight some of our peak moments from tonight on social in the upcoming days. We will share that with you panelists before we send that out. And just thank you for your time. I think obviously an hour wasn't enough, and I had other questions, but thank you for getting in front of our organization, Hispanic Public Relations Professionals, as we network together, explore this together, and try to grow in 2021. Apologies for running 5 minutes over, but I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. Thank you, board, for being with us today. And I heard there were some national chapter members on the call as well. Have a good evening, everyone. And thank you all for joining Back to Basics, Media Relations 2021.
Stay blessed. That was
Amazing.
great.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Instagram, Facebook handles, they're all in the chat. Please follow, watch Essential
Yay.
Journalist, email
Y'all
us
take
with
care.
any questions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Reach out, say hi, send good pitches.
Send good pitches. Have a good night, guys, and stay safe, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye. You
Take
too.
care.